Hello, my name is Stephanie Foster. The book that I chose to do my book report on was Scarcity, and it's a look into what it is like to live with more needs than resources and the different impacts that brings into your life and the different mental effects that has on various individuals. To quote from the book, it is easy to confuse a mind loaded by scarcity for one that is inherently less capable. This is an example that we see almost every day where scarcity can impair many aspects of our life and cause us to function with less mental resources. This takes away from our executive control as well as our fluid intelligence, and these both greatly impact the way we think, process, and then react to different information. One study that they did to test the liquid intelligence and how it was affected was asking subjects simple questions that made them think about what they would do if they had to pay $150 to fix their car, and then insurance would cover the rest. Rich and poor alike, it didn't matter social class, they chose to fix the car with no problems, little to no thought about it. This question was then asked again, but instead subjects would have to pay $1,500, and the results were altered dramatically. While $1,500 didn't seem like a large monetary value for most of the rich, the poor were forced to think about what they would have to give up and what other payments they would have to consider. This ended up affecting their decision making and made them seem less intelligent than they did after the first question, where the richer subjects of the group saw little to no difference in their results after being asked this question. Another part of your brain that's greatly affected by bandwidth is the executive control. And this is what really impacts our self control. So, along with liquid intelligence, the bandwidth tax also lowers self control. And one example that shows this is our eating habits. When we're busy, it's harder to eat better. If your mind's distracted by something, it starts to diminish your self control. So it's causing you not to think about as much of what you're putting into your body. So you can see cake sitting on the counter, and if you're very distracted and stressed out and have a lot of other things going on, you might eat it without even thinking twice. Like, what consequences will I face from this later on? A lot of people eat fast food because it's more convenient, and people are on the go and they're busy, and they won't worry about the consequences that food's going to have on your body later. You're just worried about the immediate benefits that you'll reap from this and the food that you'll get now, and not worry about it later. So increased scarcity can cause an increase in impulsive choices. Since we need to take the extra time to process our decisions and try to control ourselves, then when our minds are overstretched, it's really hard, and it will lead to things that we necessarily wouldn't do or wouldn't eat, for example, if our minds were not overworked and overcapacitated by this problem of scarcity. The bandwidth tax is one that can change us in many ways that we might not even realize. It causes us to be forgetful and distracted, but it can also affect things such as tolerance and patience. It can affect your ability to perform logical reasoning as well as problem solving and impulse control. One popular example that's often used for the tax is this school that was located near a railway, and in one half of the school the students could very clearly hear the trains passing, and then on the other side of the school there was no background noise, no impact from the train. So what study showed was when the students were given the same test, same grade students, the same abilities, were given the same test, the ones that were near the railway were performing a lot lower on this exam. And the school found that when they put in sound panels so that the train was not affecting the students and it was not in the background noise anymore, the students eventually came back up to speed with their peers on the other side who never heard the railroads passing before. And this was really interesting because it's something that it's like subtly in the background. It's not something that necessarily stopped class and stopped them from learning, but just that background noise distraction really made a difference on how the students were learning and how they were performing. So when we're talking about slack in regards to scarcity, we're talking about the extra room or privilege that you're allotted. So this means that you don't necessarily have to worry about the trade-off effect as you would if you had less slack. Since those with lesser incomes are not as privileged, they often have less slack because they can't afford it. Can cause tunneling, which is a negative effect of scarcity, and that leads to one neglecting other things that are important. So an example of tunneling would be when we're trying to multitask in order to save time, and typically when we are multitasking, we're not saving a significant amount of time, and the trade-off of the time we do save is that the tasks that we are trying to complete are often of lesser quality because we are distracted. So almost everyone experiences tunneling. However, the rich rather than the poor experience slack. This is because with more money, therefore more resources, they are better off and can afford more slack. And one example of this was the suitcase example. They could have the same size suitcase, and the rich may be able to leave out certain items with no problem and not be very stressed out about it, where the poor might be trying to squeeze that one extra t-shirt in, or trying to figure out where they can put in more items to fill the suitcase, or if they can rearrange packing so they can fit more, where the rich often aren't as concerned about this. So another example that was used in the book was about two boys, Ben and Alex. They're buying the same expensive jacket of $200, and Alex is more well off than Ben, so buying this jacket, while he might not have been the best financial decision, he was still able to pay his rent and carry out his day normally with no worries. Ben, on the other hand, is forced to think about the trade-off and what bills he can or cannot pay because of buying this jacket. So he has to worry about when his next paycheck's coming so he can pay his electric bill, or when will he be able to afford groceries again. And this jacket really just forces him to think about other things that he has to give up. So it had a greater impact on Ben than it did Alex. Poverty is an extremely unfortunate issue that affects billions of people around the world. Even um, people living in very developed countries such as America, millions of men, women, and children are impacted by this every day. So someone living in poverty may have the same bandwidth as someone who is well off. However, the bandwidth is greatly impacted for the person living in poverty compared to the person who is not. The person in poverty has much more to worry about, and therefore they have much more on their mind that's taking up and impairing their bandwidth. An example that was used for this in the book was the African farmers. Many of them fail to farm properly or as efficiently as they could because they have so much more on their mind than just the one crop that they have to weed or take care of that day. There is much more room for error in the farming process if their bandwidth is affected. This also will cause them to be irrational and maybe not think as clearly as they would if they were not under so much stress and pressure of the success of their crops. To be a farmer, or any low-income individual for that matter, things that typically would not be a problem for others may stress you out more than usual. Simple things like groceries or electric bills can become a pressing matter. The tax on your bandwidth becomes higher, and you start to prioritize your needs by timing. Things that are coming up sooner take priority to those who have later due dates. Even though these things still need to be taken care of, if one can push them off longer and take care of other needs and obligations, they will. If those living in poverty could help build up their slack, then their bandwidth would not be as impacted as much. Slack acts as a bandwidth tax rebate, which can take off less pressure on the poor and help them to live more comfortably and with less stress. So, when overwhelmed by the stress of the emotional parts of your brain, tend to override the rational parts, which ends up hijacking your intentions and your original plans. Scarcity brings light to the different mental effects of what happens when we have less resources than we need. This book also shows the various scarcity effects on especially the poor, who are living under a lot more stress and pressure than those who are better off. If one can increase their slack and lessen the burden of their scarce resources, then they can live happier and more comfortable lives.